Welcome to the Ball and Chain. I'm your host, Hero Reviewer, and for this series, instead of breaking a show down episode by episode, here we explain all the many flaws of a particular character, using every example I can find in the show's run, and explain exactly why that character holds back the show they are in. This can range from shows I think are awesome, with a character I think is really bad, to today's example of a show I think is okay, but is held back by one character, with Nino from Quintessential Quintuplets. Real quick, I will be excluding the movie, because to be transparent, it is really horrible, and Nino is far from the only problem with it, so I'd rather give it its own video if people are interested. And there will be missing context in this video, as well as things that I consider stupid that aren't done by Nino, so they will be excluded. So I do encourage you to fact check me by watching this show for yourself. All links are in the pinned comment. So this is a section on essentially all the major continuity errors surrounding Nino, as well as all the instances where the show has a completely misinterpreted scene and is presented as having a point. So when she's directly called out on it, we will try and leave it out for this section.
Are you trying to suggest that I'm shallow?
She says this, but she just suggested the only reason a girl could want to study with this guy is because she loves him, which sounds pretty fucking shallow to me. So even if Miku was saying that, she would be completely justified in doing so.
My contacts are on the usual shelf. Could you bring them over?
This is the one and only time Nino's contact lenses are ever used as a form of conflict, and it just makes it so lazy when you consider this whole setup was only possible because of the hairdryer and this contact lens thing that's never brought up again.
It's his fault.
Let's think whose fault this is. Is it the guy doing the job he was hired to do, who Miku was getting along with perfectly fine before Nino interfered? Or is it Nino's fault, the person who intentionally tried to undermine Futaro, insulted Miku, set up that stupid contest with her to continue trying to undermine him, and then was a sore loser about it? Like, who the fuck writes this and thinks, oh yep, this makes perfect sense?
The only reason he keeps coming to see us is because Papa ordered him to.
The fact that she realizes Futaro is only there because her father hired him and pays him, and yet she still believes undermining him will make the issue of them having a tutor go away is just so bizarre and shows a lack of interest in justifying Nino's actions on the writer's part.
I don't have anybody's phone number!
Completely useless can you be?
It is weird that the past few episodes all she did was talk about how he should stay out of their lives, and yet when he is staying away in this very clear way, she is calling him useless. Like, I know it's because he isn't useful in this specific circumstance, but again, this makes her hatred of him seem too circumstantial, which isn't very good if it's supposed to be justified.
We are going to see the fireworks display together!
Proceeds to take no real action and just wait for the other girls to call her. Like, what is the point of this line? To establish the thing we've been establishing for ages, that all the girls want to see this together?
Especially because this is all your fault!
I could take every philosopher in history, put them in a room, and have them think about it till the heat death of the universe, and they would never find a way in which this is entirely Futaro's fault. Like, we'll get to a large portion of that argument later, but the short version is there is one obvious person to blame for that argument, Nino, and two smaller people, Miku and Itsuki, who could maybe take some of the blame, but Futaro is not one of them, and the idea that just because he isn't related to them, that means he is responsible for this is astounding. Like, this is blame shifting on a whole other level.
I kind of understand how Nino feels.
This is such a stupid moment to try and give Nino a point, because, newsflash, there is a big difference between someone who comes over for a few hours to do his job, and someone staying over without asking you purely because they're too stubborn to make up with their sister. So this just comes off as the writers fucking up at trying to make Nino sympathetic.
Barged into our lives!
She's right.
No, she's not! She's objectively wrong! So to be clear, since he is contemplating drowning himself here, not literally, but as a method of getting them to work together, this could obviously be a symptom of his deluded thoughts, but from a story perspective, this is supposed to be him thinking she's right, and the problem is that she objectively isn't, and this scene proves that the writers think that the argument scene was justified. Again, more on that later, but to be clear, this is not good.
That's it! Be more upset!
All you said to her was that he wore a disguise. What the disguise was, for what purpose, any context would add to Miku's reaction. But her knowledge right now, she doesn't really have a reason to, well, care, because she has no fucking clue why my man did it, what he did, like, anything. Why is Nino so convinced people will just react the way she wants them to without building on her arguments at all?
Chocolate? That sounds good. I've been craving something sweet. It isn't for you. What?
So, I would like to take this second to point out that in the last episode, Nino clearly called Futaro stupid for not getting the point of the chocolate, and yet despite that, she here has forgotten that knowledge purely for the sake of this joke that in all honesty does not make up for it.
Futaro? Wait a second. You just called him by his first name.
This is kind of a meme line to me, because while it is somewhat accurate, the problem with it is that she never called him anything, just pronouns like he or you, or insults like creep, idiot, stalker, etc. So, the fact that the show treats this like Nino went from last name to first name, even though she just went from, like, insults and pronouns to first name is just kind of stupid and funny to me.
I've worked up all of my courage, and he ruined it.
I would personally love to see how the eFooder ruined that, considering A, it was her plan, and B, the fact he didn't know who she was changed nothing. It wasn't like he said no, and who are you? Just, who are you? That doesn't inherently imply he wouldn't be down for the idea if she told him she was Nino, so she ruined it for herself and then blamed it on him, which seems like a pretty common occurrence, which shows that nothing changed after she fell for him. But again, more on that in the arc section.
Why would I do a stupid thing like that?
That is frankly inconsistent with her line before about how she valued their relationship as sisters over their love of Futaro, and yet here she is saying it would be a stupid idea for her to comfort Miku because she is competing with her for Futaro. And it makes no sense that this would be the scene where she would contradict this line and not the scene with Ichika, since that one was more rivalry based, whereas this one's more supposed to be an emotional scene, playing on the sympathy of the characters, so this seems like a pretty big misstep, actually. Honestly, this isn't necessarily a character trait done badly, but it's every case of her doing or saying something illogical that did not fit into any of the other categories, since I didn't feel like making tons of really short categories, so I hope you can forgive me for this one.
Oh, right, Yotsuba. My friend who's on the basketball team was looking for somebody to fill in for the next game.
Why does she care whether the other girls study with him? He still gets paid the same, he'll still keep coming back, and at some point he'll learn her tricks, or she'll run out of options, or both. She should know that trying to force the others to stay away from him will only make things more tense, not less.
Someone like you would never understand.
This is a pet peeve of mine, because 1, what does someone like her even mean, and 2, understand what? Essentially, this statement is just a nothing burger disguised as an argument, because it is effectively a trait of yours I won't specify, doesn't allow you to understand something I won't specify.
If inner beauty's so important to you, then I say we make it a little contest. Let's find out which one of us cooks better.
This one is stupid on about 5 levels, so let's hit them all. 1, since Miku was talking about the inner beauty of the person she, dates, proving anything about herself is pointless. And I know Nino switched to talking about Miku wearing basic clothes at the end, but surely Miku wouldn't take that as evidence she had to prove her own inner beauty. 2, this is extremely sexist to suggest the primary determinant of a woman's inner beauty is her ability to cook. 3, why would Miku even agree to this? She should know that her sister's thing is cooking, so this contest is obviously completely rigged in Nino's favor, so she should logically never agree. 4, because Futaro is the only judge and Nino specified the conditions of this in front of him, he will never in a million years let Nino win, because he is only here to make the girls study. And 5, even if Nino wins, Miku will either get better at it for next time, or just not take the bait next time, because again, the Foo Fighter works for their father and therefore can just come back again and again and again.
Stupid guy. The only reason he keeps coming to see us is because Papa ordered him to.
The fact that she realizes Futaro is only there because her father hired him and pays him, and yet she still believes undermining him will make the issue of them having a tutor go away is just so bizarre and shows a lack of interest in justifying Nino's actions on the writer's part.
I've had enough! I won't let him come back ever!
Yeah, that is most certainly not up to her. She says that like this is her house, but it is very clearly her father's, and this is very clearly her father's employee. So how she plans to keep him from this house is completely beyond me.
Because I forgot to take my...
Take what? A naked picture?
She did hear that he said, take my. So what is more likely, that he is getting a possession that belongs to him, or taking a naked picture? Something that doesn't belong to him, and therefore the possessive my makes no sense with. How does Nino think this is ever an argument that would hold up, especially in a mock court?
Let it be known, the perpetrator gave the impression he was leaving and then waited for me to exit the shower.
Not gonna lie, if Futaro somehow knew the perfect time to leave so that Nino would exit the shower by the time he went back in, that's just impressive. And yeah, Nino could have gone in while he was there, but that begs the question how she even got the impression he was leaving. And besides that, when he went downstairs, how would he have known the exact moment she got out and undressed to do this? So either she's asserting that Miku was helping him to get the naked picture, that he's a criminal mastermind who knows everything about them, or she's just stupid. And let's be honest, I think 3 is the best conclusion.
Your Honor, Miko's only defending this dirtbag because she has a crush on him.
What even is that? Firstly, in a real court of law, that would never hold up, because the defense of the perpetrator always has some reason other than providing the truth to do it, typically being money. So imagine if a lawyer said to the judge, Your Honor, this guy's lawyer is only defending him because he paid him money. And as an argument, this is just a circumstantial ad hominem and doesn't argue against anything Miku said, because regardless of whether that's true or not, Miku's evidence still stands. That's why circumstantial ad hominem is called a fallacy.
Need I remind you that this lowlife saw me naked?
Right, that's what we're talking about. Can you go back to the part where it was on purpose instead of trying to argue that you're fucking Diana and no man can see you that way? Again, you can tell she's out of leverage, but for some godforsaken reason, the writers wanted to drag this scene out longer than it needed to be.
Yeah, and delete that photo before I end your life.
Sorry, I thought Nino wanted Fu out. If Itsuki deletes the photo and Futaro goes to their dad saying that the girls aren't letting him in, they tell him it was because he harassed them with no evidence, then he'll just be back in like that. So this is another utterly nonsensical line.
I've been wondering what all this tension is about with you and Itsuki.
And you didn't get an answer, because the fact he decided to reveal that information to who he thought was Itsuki shows that their argument and thus subsequent tension isn't about that. So what is Nino babbling on about here? It's completely beyond me.
Itsuki, don't let that creep manipulate you.
Sorry, could you show me the part where he was manipulating her or anyone? The whole reason she's pissy at him is because he was too honest, and Ichika and Yotsuba decided to study with him with minimal prompting, and Miku wasn't manipulated, though Futaro did put a lot of effort to try and get her to study with him. Like, this is just Nino blatantly lying to try and manipulate Itsuki, and pretty much anyone can catch the irony there.
Oh, relax. That idiot couldn't tell a difference between us 5 if his life depended on it.
Then, how does the man know which 3 study with him? I know she means if they are disguised as each other, but that isn't really a fair thing to make that comment over, since generally it's harder to recognize someone when they're disguised, so this just comes off as Nino being a dick to the man.
I thought if you moved around, you'd die.
1, how did she ever buy that? I mean, firstly, there is really no such thing as a disease that kills you if you move, but even if that disease did exist, could you just randomly catch it by sitting around? And 2, more importantly to me, how did she not catch how Yotsuba was just lying so blatantly it isn't even funny? This is just supposed to be a gag, but it wastes like 3 minutes of time, and that 3 minutes could most certainly have been put to better use than this.
Yeah, and what gives you the right to do that?
How about the fact that it is her house and therefore she is able to give people permission to enter it and talk to people? Also, like with everything, Nino is not providing a reason as to why Futaro can't enter, except that she personally considers it creepy, which is just an idiotic way of arguing.
He's one of my relatives. But that picture was taken a while ago, so...
Wow. Well, I can tell who got all the good looks in your family.
It's insane to me she buys this, because 1, he did not exactly say it with confidence, and 2, and more importantly, why would Futaro have a picture of his relative in his student handbook instead of one of, you know, him? And my issue with this is that her buying this shit is exactly what leads to the Kitaro plot, which we'll get to later on in the video.
Even so, People tend to get flirty when they're on a traveler's high like that.
You're kidding me. No, they fucking don't. That's some bullshit. Sure, I can see the argument that, say, if you have liked a girl for a while and then you're on a traveler's high, you might get bold enough to flirt with her there, but how many times has he said to all of them he has no interest in them? A lot. So the idea he goes from zero to hero just because he's on a trip is some true bullshit.
Ichika, you haven't said anything, you do it.
You'd think her not saying anything would be the exact reason why she would be the last choice, since the fact that she's silent would clearly indicate she's uncomfortable with the idea of spending the night with him, so obviously in this case she would be the last choice, not the first.
It was a friend? Then it should be you.
But why? No, seriously, she is just trying to redirect it to another girl and is making no argument that can't be applied directly back to her. This is what my mate calls a scared elephant fallacy, and it is pretty funny to watch in action.
Don't just barge in. This is my room.
Yeah, and? Who do you think is paying for you to stay here?
So, according to this logic, Futaro seeing Nino in episode 3 would have been completely justified if he had bought her house beforehand. Like, people's desire for privacy has nothing to do with who is paying for their accommodation. He isn't saying she isn't allowed to see him, just that he'd have preferred if she'd consulted him on it first.
What'd you expect? My sisters thought you were teetering on the brink of death, so they acted as quickly as they could.
How does that respond to what he was saying at all? He said you didn't have to go out of your way to get me a fancier room, and she goes, well, we acted fast, what do you expect? Like, do you see how that just misses the point? And again, this is her first time being back in the season, and she's just a complete idiot.
Ha! There you are! What are you, a dog? Why don't you just let him rest?
So, this begs a few questions. One, if this was all the consequence for Nino, why did she bother hiding? And two, what is even the point of this scene? Nothing they do with these two is particularly funny, and the scene would work a lot better if it was just Miku and Ichika, since everything they do with Nino and Yotsuba could be cut with almost zero consequence. The consequence being the exposition about who's paying for this, which could still be integrated into a two-girl version of this scene.
Nino, that's my drink. I'm borrowing it.
So, A, she knows that stealing an eraser, something that has plenty of lifetime, is not equivalent to stealing a drink, something of the same monetary value but with a far lower lifetime. And B, how has she at no point tried matcha soda? Miku is implied to have been drinking it for a while, so therefore you'd think she'd have done this at some point, especially because Miku, offered it to her in Season 1, Episode 3, and she declined it, inherently implying that, she's had it before.
Who cares whether I pass the exams? I certainly don't.
So, firstly, that will only put him on your case more, and secondly, and more importantly, why doesn't she care? You'd think if she decided on that day to study that she clearly has a use for graduation, and yet her starting one fight later and suddenly that goes out the window.
They're having a good sale today. And you should be able to carry that.
So, one, like a lot of her dialogue, that's sexist, and two, and the issue with this mechanically, is why did she bring him along at all? He doesn't live at their house, and he isn't particularly strong, as is the point of this line, so why would Nino drag him along to go shopping? Is just utterly bizarre.
That's Dad. To be fair, though, he's kind of in the right. Thing is, right isn't always what matters.
Hitchens would have a mighty fine shave off this shit. This is her going, well, that's who he is, with no evidence, which is at least a common error in this dialogue, so I could forgive it. But then she goes, he is in the right, without elaborating, which is stupid because what the right is subjective, and besides, what about his behavior is even correct? And then she goes, well, being right isn't all that matters. And you go, well, if you're right, aren't you correct? Like, why didn't they expand on this line a little more, or just cut it? Because since all the legwork to even attempt to make this line make sense is done by the audience, then why even have a line? Why not just let the audience think about this?
But I think living this way is going to change us for the better. And I feel like we've already made some good progress.
Did anyone teach Nino that you need to evidence things? Like, she never mentions what changes they have made, why those changes are beneficial. She just says they've changed for the better and expects us as the audience to work it out. which is what we in the writing biz call lazy.
Are you crazy?
Firstly, no, he's not crazy. That was a pretty reasonable assertion. And the problem here is, this is her like basically tripling down on her decision to try and avoid him to escape her feelings as if that will ever work, which makes it even dumber because not only do they have the character make the bad decision, which obviously is pretty bad writing if that's the only way you can justify things, but then they don't even have her learn from it, just keep doubling down on it, which builds on a lot of her flaws and just is a terrible moment overall.
Girl. And I'll make you see me as one.
I would like to take this second to remind Nino that this is the 21st century, and men can be gay and ace openly now. Sorry you missed it, it was a whole civil rights thing. Like, the idea the only reason Futaro wouldn't be interested in dating her is because he doesn't see her as a girl is frankly really stupid.
Since it's just you and me, do you want me to wash your back or something?
What is she planning here? Firstly, I don't get how this will bring their relationship closer, but besides that, he knows about her feelings and was very clearly not interested. So what Herculean leap in logic makes her think washing his back will change that is just utterly beyond me.
I just want things to stay the way they are for a bit longer. Oh, so confessing isn't enough.
I would just like to point out that Ichika said to her that she liked the guy and wanted things to stay the same, but Nino's issue is that the guy she's into doesn't love her, so obviously the fact that she draws the conclusion she needs to go further from this talk is utterly stupid.
I think I'll take him by the hand. No, I'll hug him. And if he still doesn't take the hint, then I'll kiss him!
So the problem with this is that the main problem she's having is with getting him to, like her, or engage with her feelings, and so grabbing him without consent or violating his boundaries by forcibly hugging or kissing him will do nothing but convince him that she's insane and that he needs to get as far away from her as possible. I would love to know what about her conversation with Ichika gives her the idea that going further when Futaro isn't interested in her will ever be a good idea. This is impressively terrible dialogue.
You done any kissing scenes yet? What are you suggesting?
And one more reminder that she has received a critique of her idiotic planning, and instead of realizing that violating people's boundaries is a pretty big turn-off and generally a crime, she just decides to try and become so good at violating his boundaries that she won't care, which is mind-bogglingly stupid.
I've won this battle. But now that we work together, I'm going to make him fall in love with me for sure.
So the problem with this line is because just saying you're going to make something happen with no plan and infinite detrimental evidence to that conclusion just sounds dumb. Like me saying, I'm gonna make New Zealand the dominant world power for sure. It sounds dumb. So obviously the idea you can make a guy with no interest in you or dating itself fall for you just because you work together is also stupid.
I confessed to him. That had to have changed something, right?
That's not how people work. If they don't love you and make it clear to you that that's the case, why in the fuck would they magically change their tune just because you like them? That is just not at all how people work, and it is just astoundingly stupid.
I can't fail. I need to prove myself as part of the team and become closer to Futaro.
That is just wrong. Last I checked, Futaro doesn't tie much value to the success of the business he works for, so the idea that Nino contributing to that success will bring her closer to him is frankly laughable.
Then why? Why have you been avoiding me?
She knows he isn't allowed in the kitchen, right? That was something she witnessed, no? Like, the idea he's avoiding her is freaking stupid. The closest was when he was watching her enviously and then snuck away when she turned, but that was just him avoiding the consequences for that stupid action, and the rest of the time he was simply doing other jobs instead of intentionally trying to avoid her.
Who said you could decide?
No one said she could decide. She just made a suggestion and then the others agreed. There was no one who went, "This is Ichika's call. What is Nino babbling on about here?"
A better idea. Fu and I can be in a group.
Oh yes, the most famous compromise. Instead of either of you getting what you want, how about I get what I want? Like, this just seems like a completely serious version of this joke from TMNT 2012.
We'll compromise. I'll lead.
Except there, it was done completely ironically. And from a character who in the text is supposed to be an idiot. Not like in this scene, which is from a character who is making a point completely seriously and is not framed as an idiot.
Zip it! You should be grateful for the chance to go out on a date with me.
Firstly, he is not interested in you, and you know that, so the idea he should appreciate an idea he doesn't want to do is stupid and comes off as Nino being comically arrogant in her appearance, which I just think of as bizarre considering she isn't even the most popular girl of these 5 with guys in universe. So this just speaks to Nino's arrogance, which is not a trait she should still be displaying 2 seasons in.
We're following them.
Did she ever stop and think that maybe he is in his own group so he can hang out with the guys in his group? Not so he can spend the trip with the Quints anyway? And besides, that is abundantly clear that Nino doesn't seem to understand what the meaning of the word no is, which is just very stupid.
The way Fu went. I'm gonna fall behind if I don't meet up with him here.
Fall behind what? He isn't interested in dating. He has said that over and over and over and over again. And yet somehow Nino keeps treating it like this is presently a competition for his heart where one of the girls can definitely start dating him if we win. Not him not being in love with any of them and therefore not caring who the winner is.
Now only Ichika's left standing. She's a sneaky little weasel, but I'll defeat her.
How? You do not have any plans other than just trying to spend time with him, even though he is still, might I add, showing no interest in you. Who the hell thought this was a good character moment?
What I do know is that I love him more than anyone else could.
You don't know that, you just think that. But there is no scale of love, and thus no way of measuring it to prove conclusively you love this person more than someone else. And even if there was, Nino hasn't even bothered to consider how much the other girls love Futaro, just believing she loves him most. So how Nino gets off saying this despite having no way of knowing how much the other girls love him, or how much she loves him, is truly astounding to me.
This trip is the perfect chance to get closer to him, and you're holed up in here.
There is no evidence of that. Please, for the love of God, stop having this character admit that she knows nothing about the mechanics of love due to never having fallen for anyone, and then just have her go, this is definitely the way to make him fall for you.
I don't like it. We can't do this after we all made such careful plans. It's 1 in 5. Those odds are terrible.
What are you talking about, you fool? This plan only works under the assumption you don't know what he's doing, and since Nino ends up being wrong, it means she doesn't know. So therefore, the fact she says 1 in 5 are terrible odds is stupid, as whether they choose different ones or not, they will always still ultimately be 1 in 5. So what she's babbling about here is completely beyond me. So here, what I mean is, every instance of Nino being overly aggressive to someone, typically Futaro, for no reason, or a reason that makes no logical sense.
Listen, nobody likes you. So go home already, scum!
How the fuck does she know that? This is her first ever interaction with the guy. And yeah, we see the people at his school don't like him, but this is just forced aggression for the sake of it.
None of us need a tutor, so you should probably go away.
Sorry, she does realize that my man didn't show up here because he felt like teaching them for fun. He's doing it because her father is paying him. So trying to make him leave like this is just utterly pointless.
Well, goodbye.
She does know that 1, having drugs powerful enough to knock a man out that long is definitely a crime. 2, drugging another human being is also a crime. And 3, what does she hope to gain from this? Her drugging him isn't his fault, so he'll still be able to come back the next day, and this time he certainly won't drink water from her. So what does she hope to achieve from this? Is she just trying to waste his time? Even though he's the only one who profits from this?
Come back for more? I thought for sure you'd given up on this pipe dream.
What pipe dream? The pipe dream of making money? He seems to be doing that pretty well. It's weird because this line is at the start, and then later, she admits to believing her dad paying him is the only reason he comes. So why she says shit like this to him is utterly beyond me.
Why are you so useless?
Sorry, how is he being useless? He's just leaving the building. You know, the building you've been trying to get him to leave all day? What the fuck is the point of this line? It's never built on. She never qualifies it. You're just supposed to go, well, she's tsundere, so it makes sense.
No, I'm not. Anyone who'd let a creepy guy like you into our house is totally stupid.
So your father is stupid then? Also, what has he really done that's inherently creepy? She should know by now he wasn't in the room with her for any pervy reason. and in their only other interactions, he has shown zero pervy qualities. So this line does not feel earned at all, and just feels like her being an asshole.
What's Itsuki doing with that waste of space?
This line is just way too on the nose, and earlier in the episode, we get far more lines of Itsuki disliking Futaro, but they aren't her literally saying to his face that he's a waste of space. Because, you know, Itsuki's a more compelling character.
And you. It should have only been the 5 of us. So why are you tagging along?
Does she remember the fact that A, they invited his sister, who he would obviously come with? B, he went with them to their house to make them finish their work before they went, which should have made it really clear to her that he was coming. And C, he walked with them from their house to here, and yet somehow she is saying this now as if it makes any sense. Almost like this is the problem with just cutting into random locations.
And don't you get any ideas about Yotsuba, mister!
Does it look like he has got any ideas about her? Like, look at the scenes Nino, Yotsuba, and him have shared. He has only talked about studying. So how she thinks he would date her off that statement is mind-blowing. And as a joke, this is completely unfunny. So this is just an utterly pointless moment.
Just so you know, you aren't invited.
I mean, he points it out here, but like, he knows he isn't invited. And he is clearly just trying to help her get there. And again, also, these stupid moments make her arc seem even stupider, because even when he's being nice to her, she is just being a complete bitch to him.
Time to go home.
Why? What's the hurry?
You're off the clock!
Since when did he have a clock? In episode 4, they clearly say he gets 5,000 yen each girl a day. It doesn't say a limit of time or anything, just every time he comes. And besides that, why would she ever think trying to push him out the door would persuade him to leave? Why not politely point that out to him or someone else? This way is just dumb, because it'll make him want to stay more just to, you know, spite her.
Don't tell me you're staying overnight to tutor us again!
You'd think she'd be over it after the last time, especially since she has no reason not to join in except being annoyed at him because she has to be. Again, this isn't supposed to be her trying to make the others fail, it's just her being mad at Futaro, but we've never got a good reason why she doesn't like him, so it just comes off as empty.
I never asked you for help, jerk.
He didn't give you any. That was you thinking back to that. It is still your own recollection, and while he taught it to you, the fact you chose to remember it shows that you thought it was important, so it's bizarre you sitting here calling him a dick for you remembering his teaching. That wasn't even done directly to you.
Whatever, I don't care. Anyway, let's go out and have lunch, Itsuki.
Well, I mean, you do care, because A, you wouldn't be pondering the cause of his lying down if you didn't, and B, you wouldn't have directly addressed him if you didn't care. I mean, out of the two of you, I'd say Itsuki is the one who doesn't care, since she hasn't said a word since entering and looked right at him, whereas she's just been joking the whole time, clearly showing an interest. She being Nino, of course.
He'll die? That's too bad.
To be clear, if she didn't later get surprised when he moved, I wouldn't really care that much about this line, since it could be justified as Nino just not buying the shit lie Yotsuba's telling. But the issue is, she does buy it later, and yet despite that, here she just blatantly says she couldn't care less about him dying, which is just too cartoonish, especially at this point in the series.
Oh, what do you know? It's not like you've had it done before.
Sure, he may not have had it done, but that doesn't mean he can't work out that putting something sharp through a body part tends to hurt, and since that wound isn't supposed to close, that it'll probably hurt for a longer amount of time. Also, here he gives in to this, as if it's a valid point, but it's just flat out blatantly not.
We didn't buy that for your sake. We just couldn't be seen in public with you looking like a hobo.
So this aggression comes off as stupid for a number of reasons. One, she surely should know about his family situation, so calling him a hobo is pretty insensitive. Two, she was literally a few seconds ago complaining that none of the other girls were picking clothing to suit him, and yet apparently now she didn't buy it for his sake, which is just a complete contradiction. And three, why is she suddenly being this defensive? He just asked if they were okay with spending this much money, not why they were doing this. If anything, the motivation being that pathetic would make him think it's more of a waste of money, not less. Like, this is just insanely stupid.
You're crazy if you think I'm about to share a room with this guy.
First impressions are everything, and the fact they never really sold us on Nino hating him means that a moment like this just comes off as stupid and frankly a bit cringe rather than good payoff.
and teenage boys are basically animals.
She does know that, how do I put this? That's sexist and also imbecilic. He has never shown an interest in any of them, so why would he suddenly decide to make the moves on them just because they're staying the night? Especially because he's stayed the night at their house twice now, and has never once made a move on any of them. So this just comes off as the writers trying to make relatable humor, and it just falling flat.
Hey, who asked you?
You did, by not providing a reason for you not wanting to other than you have better things to do. Imagine me saying this far into the video that I have better things to do than rewatch the show just to dunk on Nino. You'd know that I was lying, and it's the same issue here.
Even so, people tend to get flirty when they're on a traveler's high like that.
So, a couple things. First of all, this moment should have tipped him off to the voice. More on that later. And second of all, you'd think after having a happy night, she'd be a bit less of a tyrant to this guy, especially because he's related to the guy she apparently loves so much. But nope, because she has to tsundere regardless of how stupid it sounds.
And our school camp would be so much more interesting. But instead, we were forced to share a room with that annoying brute right off the bat.
Sorry, what part of Futaro is brute like? Could you describe him as a loser? Probably. But a creep or a brute? Definitely not. And it's completely bizarre to me how they constantly have Nino's words to try and insult him be so useless.
I'm not telling you.
So, a couple things. First of all, this moment should have tipped her off to the voice. More on that later. And second of all, you'd think after having a happy night, she'd be a bit less of a tyrant to this guy, especially because he's related to the guy she apparently loves so much. But nope, because she has to tsundere regardless of how stupid it sounds.
I told you, it wasn't like that.
Then what was it like? I don't get the point of this moment. This is the season finale, and they did a good job up until this point, and then they just have to have this line for no reason. Like, this is the one time she really does care about his health, and earlier expressed that, so having her say this here just seems so lame.
You're acting really out of character, and I don't know how to feel about it, so please get back to normal.
How is he being out of character? He hasn't said anything. He's fucking sick. How do you know if he magically got better, he wouldn't just be the same guy? What is the point of this line? Was this really the best they could think of for this character? Actually, it probably was.
Don't speak to me. You don't know anything. I'm not taking this from you. You're just a tutor that our father hired. An outsider.
So this is insane in many ways. So let's go through each sentence. The bit, don't speak to me, is just stupid because he isn't being aggressive. He is trying to be matter of fact here, and she is just being a massive dick to him. And it comes off as way too angry for no justifiable reason. You don't know anything, you're just a tutor that our father hired bit. I would like to point out that this is an utter rental fallacy, and that she said he doesn't know anything, and then she says he's a tutor that her father hired, which is a flat-out contradiction, since the fact he's a tutor her father hired proves that he does in fact know things and is trying to impart that wisdom upon her. And the fact she is unwilling to accept it is her problem, not his. And finally, an outsider part is just an ad hominem and has nothing to do with anything. Like, yes, he doesn't live here. What does that have to do with you being behind on schoolwork and his desire to make sure you aren't? This is an impressively stupid line. Like, don't get me wrong, I've heard worse, but this is pretty bad.
Why should I care if he made some stupid worksheets? It's not like I need them.
Also, this is how you really know she didn't listen to what my man had to say, because he said that she needed to get back on track with her studies, and yet Nino is out here saying she doesn't need his sheets. Like, yes you do, you need them unless you want to fail high school, you absolute carver bowl.
You're just a loser. You think you're helping us learn? Get a grip!
And also, since this argument is completely unjustified, her calling him a loser is a stretch, at least in these circumstances. But furthermore, saying you think you're helping us learn, well, firstly, yeah, he is helping your grades. They have improved. But as for why you think he isn't helping, how about because you spent all your time undermining him? I don't at all get what they're trying to go for here, but it is dumb, let me tell you.
What are you citing with this idiot?
Since she had some character development, Besides that, what is Nino's motivation for hating him so? And why does she so vehemently believe that all the other girls should hate him, despite the fact she never presents any logical reason for this, and the fact that she is supposed to be a sympathetic character just blows my mind.
He's got you guys wrapped around his little finger, Itsuki!
This argument is hilariously stupid. So, she basically is asserting here that the other four are not actually disagreeing with you because they genuinely believe they should, and that Nino is wrong. It's just because they're agreeing with Futaro, and he's wrapped them round his finger, which is just a completely fallacious argument, because there's plenty of other reasons for someone to disagree with your perspective, other than that they're just agreeing with someone else, for a reason you can't even quantify. This is what me and my friend group call a camera obscurus fallacy.
I get it. All of you are gonna choose him over me.
This is truly impressive to me, how many bad lines Nino has in this scene. This is another classic mistake, where when people agree with the person who's being rational, someone tries to turn around and go, "You're choosing him, huh? I thought you were my..." insert role they expect the other person to fill here. Again, if Nino is supposed to have some sort of a point here, I really shouldn't get the impression I need to give her a lecture on fallacies and argumentation 101.
Our mom's gone, Itsuki, so stop trying to be a replacement for her.
Since when was that ever a thing? Think about what they've actually done with Itsuki for the past 13 episodes, and you realize that at no point was she ever criticized for taking a too matriarchal role, nor was her innate connection to their mother ever mentioned until now, and so this just comes off as another stupid thing Nino is throwing out for no reason, even though it's actually built on later.
I told you, stop talking like you understand us.
Well, firstly, she says that, like, her entire argument back at the house wasn't Futaro bad because he not related to us. So he took that to be, you know, that she cared a lot about her sisters and not say, I don't know, that Nino's an idiot with no argumentation skills. So her saying that he was wrong to think that conclusion he came to was correct implies Futaro should have gone with the second one, which I doubt Nino wants either. But because she doesn't present, you know, another option, that's pretty much what's implied here.
Yeah, well, the rest of us still have to look at it.
That has no bearing on anything. I mean, she isn't telling him how to style it, so logically he could still style it how he wants in there, and she would still have to look at it. He's just washing it with more product, which might make it smell better and stay in the state you style it, but doesn't make it styled in a specific way that's more appealing.
I don't need your opinion. Besides, how would you know? You drink old lady tea.
So obviously this is another I didn't ask for your opinion, which is just the opposite of a subdued line. And besides that, she says that Miku doesn't drink that kind of tea, therefore she can't know the negative effects of it, which makes so little sense it's impressive. Like, did she ever stop and think, perhaps Miku doesn't drink that kind of tea? So that she doesn't get sick?
He did. Isn't that selfish? Who cares what that jerk wants?
I would love to know how him wanting the best for you in scenarios other than the ones he personally benefits from is being selfish. And even though I know she was referring to the fact that he was expressing his personal desires, one, that is not a crime, and two, and more importantly, the reason she won't come home is purely due to a personal desire. So this point is entirely moot.
I wasn't referring to you. You got that?
She says this like he will ever buy it, since it's obviously a lie, since if it wasn't him, as in Kitaro, then apparently in the interim between their last meeting and now, Nino fell for another person and got her heart broken by them. So you know this is so transparently a lie because that's such a far-fetched story, and you'd think Nino would just not look at him or say anything about this instead of saying this.
It would. But when have you not been a selfish person? Never cutting us any slack, forcing us to memorize so many formulas that it felt like our brains would explode.
How about since the start of this season consistently and the start of episode 2 on and off? Like, all the points she brings up were problems with, you know, the curriculum. Like, Futaro didn't make up those formulas. They were mandatory knowledge, and he was just trying to get them not to fail. As for never cutting them slack, it was because they weren't trying before, so he likely needed to make sure they did well, which is certainly not utterly selfish, though I could see it working with her expanding more, but evidencing her points is not one of Nino's strong suits. Besides, this arc dealt with a lot of intense family-related issues, and so this being the line to resolve the conflict makes it seem that the moral of the story was to be selfish. and I doubt that was intended, but it comes across that way, which is a dogshit moral, and makes the writers sound like they're just really dogshit people.
You have to show up everywhere?
So this line makes no sense because they're the ones who always roll up on him. So this would make more sense if Futaro said it, though it still wouldn't be logical since it's just a contrivance or in story a coincidence. It's not necessarily someone conspiring to organize a meetup.
Maybe if you didn't screw up the looks and the taste, you'd be okay. But you'd be better off buying chocolates from the store. That's enough! Shut up.
So this moment is bad for a few reasons. The first reason being, again, 75% of the way through the show, you wouldn't think this character would have such a blatant disregard for people she supposedly cares about's feelings. But it gets worse because the fact that she immediately backpedals after seeing the crying clearly shows she didn't anticipate Miku to, react to this, which is just kind of stupid if she was going to be this aggressive.
Lucky you. You're useless to me now.
So this is another classic way too aggressive line, but besides that, it doesn't even make any sense because the fact she passed with his help inherently implies that he holds value in her education, so it would make no sense for her to say he didn't.
What do you want now? I'm not switching jobs with you.
So firstly, that's really freaking rude. She was asking for a basic favor. She clearly wasn't asking for a job switch. But furthermore, you can't just switch jobs at a business because you know they hire their employees for a reason. So why the hell would they just go, oh, this one didn't work, let's instantly hire Miku without putting up help wanted signs to try and get more qualified help? So the reason for all this aggression being an issue is that it makes Nino come off more like a dickhead than a well-meaning but emotional character, and because of this being what they base all of what they try and do with her character on in the future, it would basically always be set up for failure. Though, if you thought they got away with it, you clearly didn't read the title of the next section. Now, this is pretty much what it says on the box. Why the writer's attempts at character development for Nino are so bad.
I've decided I won't accept you.
So here we have an episode of Nino being a dick to Futaro. Her sister calls her out, and so she continues being a dick to him. And then they all call her out, and she resolves to be a dick to him for the rest of the time. So it makes you think, one, what's the point of this character if she's never going to change? And two, what's the point of this episode if we've learned nothing new about the characters, nor did they develop them, nor did the plot progress in any literal way? And she does develop somewhat, but not as a person, which is the problem.
So you're aware, I'm going to tell my father exactly what happens today.
So here, she clearly says that she's going to tell her dad what happens, showing she still hates him for no reason, and yet later, for no explained reason, she has a change of heart. And again, if the show could be bothered to actually work on Nino, then we could feel that change happening and mattering, but neither of which occur because the show just accepts us to take everything about Nino at just complete face value.
Nino, you refused to listen to me until we were almost done. Don't slack off just because I won't be around.
That is all he has to say to her. Like, watch the scene. He has some genuine character-based advice about the scores for the other four, and for Nino, who just says, hey, you were a dick to me and that's why you failed, so try not to be a dick to the next guy. Again, it's just depressing by comparison, and really shows how little has been done with her character, which is even dumber because they're about to put a shift in here, and they themselves know that it's completely unearned.
Hello, Dad. It's me, Nino.
This is my problem with Nino in episode 7. She says that she'll tell her dad the results honestly, then she gets mad at Futaro when she realizes his advice was actually helpful. She gets the least helpful feedback because she's just that shallow of a character, and now magically she wants to help him keep his job. So now we can see the issue here is the fact that Nino doesn't give a justification after this, which means the writers saw this as a payoff. So logically, if there's a payoff, we should see the setup. But it just isn't present. We see Nino being a dick, followed by her being a dick, then being a dick, some more, then trying in an exam while being a dick, then saving Futaro's job. It is lacking so much setup, it is just hollow. And again, if she didn't have such a cartoonish level of hatred for Fu, I could buy this maybe. at least I would think it wasn't a great moment and leave it at that. But 4 minutes and 9 seconds ago, she got mad at him for teaching her something, like it was his job to do. So the idea that this girl would turn around and help him is just absurd to me.
Coming from you, Nino, I'm inclined to believe it.
But it gets worse, because what does this line even refer to? Does her dad know about her comical hatred for her tutor, and thus coming from her this makes sense? While that would be a logical explanation, my problem is there is no evidence to suggest if he is fully aware of the girl's relationships. And if he was, then why would he call Itsuki first? Because if I knew all about it, I would call her second to last. So therefore their dad must be saying that because Nino doesn't typically lie, she must be truthful here, which was not set up at all, and in fact, the first thing she does is trick Futaro into drinking drugs, so the idea that anyone would get the impression that she is the most honest is kind of stupid. Again, this issue would have been solved if the writers actually let Nino have less moments of being a mustache-twirling villain, and more of her being an actual character.
Well. Are you napping in someone else's house? No, let me guess. Somebody drugged you.
And then, right after kind of having Nino change, they have her laugh and joke about Futaro being lying down and sick, which shows just pure hatred toward him, and again makes the payoff in episode 7 feel even more vapid, because it wasn't a permanent change, and it wasn't justified within that narrative. So what it was a borderline contrivance.
Haven't you noticed? Normally, Nina would have tried to find a way to kick you out, but she didn't this time.
Ah, yes, she said that she was fine with him meeting his demise, and didn't care about him having a sore stomach or burned face, but at least she didn't try and kick him out of the apartment. Really breaking new ground there. This is building on Futaro's comment to her, in that Nino is so much more shallow in this first season than any of the other girls, which just makes them trying to express her change compared to the others so fucking funny, because they haven't done any effective character work.
What'd you scream for? You hurt?
No way. Could it be?
So we can kind of skim over this scene, but let's get the most obvious point out of the way first. How does she not work out it's Futaro? And I know that you can excuse the eyes or the height, because if they're related, it's feasible they could share that. No, it's how Nino can't tell that this guy very clearly has Futaro's voice, and especially because she heard him before she saw him. And obviously his voice is the one thing he can't wholly share with a relative. And they could have maybe excused that if he had a really intense accent here, whether by doing it himself or it being a twerk of his character from the start. Maybe she could think that they just have the same accent but different voices, but he very clearly doesn't. And furthermore, to make this even stupider, she saw Yotsuba and Futaro in the scaring thing earlier, and he was wearing the wig. And she knows Futaro was in the test of courage due to Itsuki bringing it up before. So obviously, if there is a guy that sounds just like Futaro with blonde hair in this forest, it is not a relative, it is obviously him. Like, how she can't work it out is stupid to an impressive level. So the fact this wasn't thought through this much is truly astounding. And again, the scene is supposed to be a pivot point for her character, and the idea that it is undone in such an obvious way makes it just so pathetic.
I can move yet. I'm too scared. Could you please hold my hand?
So this whole scene is bizarre, because while she is in love with him, and I can see it on that front, the main issue is that this builds into the problem with Nino's attempt at an arc, which is that she just doesn't really have one. She just goes from not liking someone to loving them, and that's it. No change as a person. And while here it isn't as bad, this is supposed to be build up for her big change in season 2, and this is just horribly forced and stupid, and she later in this episode proves she hasn't changed at all as a person. And furthermore, another problem is that this scene is basically made moot by the midpoint of season 2, since Nino doesn't change as a person and Kitaro isn't real. She finds out about that and basically disregards it. So the fact that this is the halfway point of her arc is troubling to say the least.
You jerk. I think I'd recognize who I gave this to.
See what I mean? Now she went from being super in love with him to actually just being the same person as she always is. So we are at episode 11, and she's the only one who hasn't changed at all, but also had by far the most cartoonish character to start with, so it is the least justified that she hasn't changed. It is utterly bizarre to me how the writers thought this was a good scene for Nino's character, because to put it bluntly, it just shows how pointless she really is.
Then there's dummy number 2. She puts her sisters above everything else, so she's always getting wrapped up in arguments. I thought that's all there was to her, but now I'm not so sure.
So this is now the 15th episode of the show, and he says Nino cares about her sisters, so she argues with them. But then she keeps telling me that's not her motivation, so really I've got no idea what to say about her. And this is just the issue with Nino. She argues with people for no reason and then decides not to for no reason. So if you try to sum her up, then you just fall flat on your face, because all she does is wind people up for no reason.
I'm sure there's at least one poor sap on Earth who could fall in love with you.
Also, that moment doesn't even feel earned, mostly because it doesn't know if it wants to be Nino insulting the man or her trying to make him feel better. And you can fix this easily by having her be sincere, then have the flashing joke and have her try to take it back after that, which could still keep the facade while having a more meaningful change.
I really do feel bad about what happened. Sorry.
Another unearned moment. The problem is that since her outburst was unmotivated in that episode, there is no way to have a tangible change. And besides that, we have her going from hating Futaro and Itsuki to just Itsuki here, which is really stupid because those two should be the more reconcilable ones, and yet they are keeping them apart for no reason other than to just draw out this imbecilic arc.
It was like they left the quintuplet nest, and me along with it. I was the only one who wasn't able to move on. I can't even change my hair. That's why I need to leave the nest now. Otherwise, I'll end up all alone.
So I'd like to say, since this is supposed to be showing something deeper about her character, it should make sense. She says the others left the nest and she didn't, which is stupid for every aspect of their differences, so let's hit them all. For personality, it makes no sense because 1, they didn't actively choose to have different personalities to her, and 2, since they all obviously changed their personalities at the same time because it was just a natural part of them aging, any one of the girls could make this argument and it would make just as much sense as any other, which is to say very little. Next, for appearance, the issue is that pretty obviously Nino changed too, because the whole point is that Renna is what the girls would have been if they never changed. And Nino doesn't look like that at all, so clearly changed her hair and all the other things that would make her different from that standardized appearance. I mean, for Christ's sake, in episode 7 of this season, they all dress up like Itsuki, even though based on how Nino is talking, you'd think they'd all dress up like her. Also, the way she finishes this, saying she needs to leave the nest or she'll be alone, she does know that the way the others left the nest was by changing, something she has also done, by the way, but even ignoring that and taking it on her terms, it makes no sense that to leave the nest to not be alone would simply not entail changing, but instead leaving the other girls and living on her own. I would truly love to know how this speech got through that many people and none of them decided that this was stupid.
Hey.
Hi. Come in, get comfortable.
So I'd like to point out that the way Futaro phrased it and the ease with which he supposedly got his relative, apparently a different school here, and him not being here should really show that this isn't really Kitaro, and that should make her realize that, you know, it was Futaro the whole time. But as she is apparently so stupid, it takes him talking so much like Futaro that she can't not know it's him for her to work it out. Besides that, the fact that she is only this nice because she's in love is beyond annoying, and we don't need to show all the examples of her being nice to Kitaro, but they are numerous, and they build to the core issue with Nino's full arc, where she doesn't have an arc, she has a U-turn, which is just so freaking annoying and lazy.
Yeah, but that time and that time, it was always him.
So this is my issue with the entire Kitaro plot, is that it has no bearing on anything. She doesn't even have anything to say after it's over other than, it was Futaro the whole time. Like, no comment on the fact that she was in love with him despite the fact he was barely putting on an act. No wondering about why he was in the blonde wig the first time. No discussion of whether the memories are tainted by the knowledge that it was Futaro. Nothing. So not only was it bad writing even at the time it was done, but by the end of the show, you realize it was an utter waste of your time and energy. And I know they try and explore it, but it doesn't work. And it just really does show how little work went into Nino's development.
Itsuki, Yotsuba, Ichika, Miku. No way.
And also, we have another payoff that is unearned. Why does she decide here to help them out? Again, this is a problem with Nino in that because she does too much repetition, it means while she has as many lines as the others, generally there is a chronic lack of lines when they're needed to set up development.
Ladylike. Oh, but I like you. That one's a bit different.
What's wrong? Nothing.
Why does she even care? He's just explaining suffixes to her. And even if he was confessing at this point, why would Nino even care? I thought she hated this man. She doesn't fall for him for another couple of episodes. And my best guess is that this is a mild attempt to set up her feelings for him. But because it is, you know, a joke, it just comes off as her being mad at him for no reason. And again, they could have done some proper setup of these feelings if they actually tried. Not this half-assed bullshit.
Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm not over King Taro yet. But it doesn't make sense. I mean, this guy? There's no way he's really my Prince Charming. He's the worst.
So this has an attempt at setup, but my issue with it is that it just doesn't work at all, because she's saying she's still not over Kitaro, not something about the fact that Futaro was hardly putting on an act, so the boy she fell for was just him in a wig, and she literally calls him the worst 10 seconds later, and there isn't much more setup than this, so we don't really know if this is really her in denial or not.
Forget him. He doesn't think of me that way. It's just how it is.
So, I have a couple of issues with this. The first being that, like the majority of her arc, this is Nino just telling you the change she went through, since all the scenes she flashes back to, she was just silent in the scene, doing nothing, whereas the others are able to show their emotions a bit more in scenes that are pivotal to their arc, which makes this seem jarring by comparison. But it gets worse in the fact that she thinks she can avoid Futaro just because she wants to, has been proven to be a foolish idea, but I also don't get how that'll even help, since she'll still be hearing about him from her sisters, so she'll still likely pine for him anyway. Besides that, all the setup for her falling for him was just her thinking about Kitaro or looking mildly jealous, but never a moment of her going, I like him because X, or at least her realizing that Kitaro, the man she fell for, was just fucking Futaro in a fucking wig.
You're the worst. You know that? And you've been like this from the beginning, too. You're the biggest jerk I've ever met. And yet, somehow, I love you.
Now, this is a fake-out confession, so instead of talking about the confession part, let's hit the fact that she doesn't love him for a reason. Now, granted, none of the girls love him for a reason, which I hate, but at the very least, Ichika and Miku don't despise his very existence for the entire show's run, whereas for Nino, she has done nothing but harass, insult, drug, and more him, so we really should get a reason why she fell for him. But not only do they barely explore the process of her falling for him, but she actually says, I don't know why I love you. I just do. And sure, that could be seen as realistic, so what's the problem with it? Well, I have two issues with that statement. The first is that storytelling isn't reality. In reality, things can happen randomly and we accept it. Like a car coming around a corner and my leg getting run over. But storytelling is you constructing a world and characters for a reason. So while it can seem like a person can fall for someone they hated for no reason, a character should really have a reason for it. And secondly, the reason with people things seem so random is because we can't read each other's minds. In fact, in real life, a person falling for someone they used to hate might have tons of reasons. You just don't hear them unless they tell you because you can't read their mind. But in a story, you can go into the character's head, so you really should explore the thoughts that go into this. So the fact she doesn't have a reason to fall for Futaro is the fault of the writers being lazy, and calling it realistic is just a defense to excuse laziness. And excusing laziness is how we don't get great storytelling.
What I said was I love you.
And now we reach the climax. Since this is the real confession, it's time to run down Nino's arc and why it's so bad in full. So we're introduced to Nino first when she tells Futaro no one likes him, and properly in the apartment scene, where she drugs Futaro after bluntly telling him they don't need a tutor. Then for the rest of the season, proceeds to hate him cartoonishly, except for stopping him from losing his job, which is completely unset up and unjustified. Then she falls for his relative, but continues being horrible to him. Then after a studying session, she argues with the other girls and runs away, blaming Futaro for it, though she lets him off the hook later. And then Futaro dresses up as Kitaro again for her, letting her figure out it was him, and then she gets mad, then develops feelings for Futaro and confesses here. What's the problem? A few things. One, and the most obvious, is, as we've seen, almost none of this shit they do with Nino is set up at all, from the phone scene to her helping Yotsuba, and even though they kind of try and set up her loving him, it still falls flat, because they are trying so hard to keep Nino in this constant tsundere state until the confession, so she doesn't really have much material before this. And the second issue with this is that the arc of this character didn't love this other character, and so acted this way toward them, and then fell for them, so acted this way, is utter bullshit as an arc, because it doesn't imply at all that the character changes because they realize their behavior was wrong. Rather, they simply changed because they wanted to be more attractive to their love interest. Now, the show does this 3 times, but this is by far the worst case of it, because Nino had by far the most amount of flaws and the most destructive behavior when it came to Futaro, so she really would have needed something as far as permanent character change went, but instead she falls for him for no explained reason, and because of that starts being nicer, key part, to him, at the cost of being more of a dick to the other sisters who want to get with him, in Miku and Ichika, and frankly, it just shows that Nino clearly had a different mindset to the other girls, where they were more clearly made to go through a particular character arc. Nino was clearly just made to hate Futaro and have jokes about hating him, and then they realized that they should probably have a character arc, so they just recycle one they already recycled, and didn't think how poorly it fit on this character, which is artistic laziness at its finest, and the sheer amount of screen time they dedicate to this lazy waste of a character really distracts from the other characters who should have got that screen time.
I mistook him for my Prince Charming on a white horse, and I fell in love with him. Later on, I figured out what I was rejecting was the role he'd been playing in my life that entire time, and not him as a person.
So here we have an attempt at damage control by the show to try and make her arc make more sense, but there's some numerous problems here. One, the point about the link between Kitaro and Futaro is just not explained, and two, her saying that I was just rejecting the role he was playing. Well, the problem is, in every single scene supposedly presented as development for this, he was still her tutor, which means, according to this line, all of those are to be disregarded, which means this development happened off screen and all the stuff on screen wasn't real because it doesn't align with this point. You get it? The show has basically written a terrible arc and attempts to damage control, but they haven't changed their philosophy around their design for this character, so it still keeps falling flat.
And you can't tell me no.
This is a good clip to show what I mean, in that she isn't a more mature, better person. She is still just as childish as she was. It's just, instead of being childish and hating Futaro, she is childish and loving him, which isn't better!
I'm not gonna let her take you from me.
This scene is another complete encapsulation, as she goes from screaming at Futaro for no sensible reason to get out of their lives when he's helping them, to then throwing herself at him to stop Miku from getting him, when all of them explicitly decided to let the two of them get a day together. It is just a sign of completely and utterly lazy writing, in that the writers want to make it look like Nino is growing and changing, but also just kind of want to have her behave irrationally, and can't seem to pick one.
So, to frankly sum up why I think she makes the show worse, it's because her role in the story is already filled by the other girls. There is already a girl who doesn't like Futaro and Itsuki, and there are already two girls whose entire arc is falling for Futaro. And while I hate both Miku and Ichika's arcs, at least they have arcs other than that, with Ichika and her acting and Miku having the cooking thing, which I'll grant to you is tied to her relationship, but both of them are still decently executed. So what is Nino's niche? I'll tell you, being the worst version of the other characters to make them look better by comparison. For example, when you watch a character, here Nino, who is supposed to hate the main character, but they don't justify it for a whole season, and then later they give a weak justification, and even if it was justified, act far too cartoonish for it ever to work, and then the writers immediately do away with it, it makes the other character, in this case, Itsuki, who has their reason for disliking the main character established in the first episode, doesn't hate them in a cartoonish fashion, and has a developed arc of growing to like them, look way better. And with the fact that Nino's version of the arc that she falls for the main character and then tries to date him was so poor, it makes Miku's arc look passable, and even Ichika, who by all accounts has an absolutely horseshit arc, seem way better. But characters shouldn't exist purely to prop up other characters, and especially main characters shouldn't exist to prop up other characters, and especially they shouldn't be propping up other characters not as an intentional design of their character, but rather with how their writing flaws are that transparent and aggravating that the other characters are propped up purely off of not being that character. If Nino and all her screen time was removed from the show, then the show would have around a fifth of its screen time left over, which could then be divided into giving the other girls more screen time. Perhaps develop Ichika more and why she loves Futaro. Perhaps do more with Futaro and Yotsuba to make the movie seem a lot less like a plain attempt at subversion. Or perhaps develop Miku and give her something other than the cooking thing tied to her arc around loving Futaro. There is infinite potential, and all that would be required is taking out Nino. And what you lose from the removal of Nino is utterly irrelevant, because every role she fills is already filled. So therefore, all she does is make the show worse by stinking up the place with awful dialogue, decisions, and a truly baffling arc. So we've reached the end. So you might be wondering at this point, do I think this is a bad show? No, I don't. Do I think it's great? Probably not. Overall, Itsuki, Futaro, and Yotsuba are good. Miku is tolerable. Ichika is pretty horrible. The plots are pretty standard fare for the genre, and the executions are a mixed bag, with some being good and some being some of the most utter dog shit I've seen. But overall, I think the show would be of a much higher quality if it didn't have to deal with trying to carry the weight of Nino. Now, if you've heard out my points and got this far and still like Nino for whatever reason, sweet as, bro. Glad you can accept the flaws and things and still be able to enjoy them. I respect that. And if I've convinced some of you to look deeper at Nino and after said look realize how bad a character she is, then I'm glad I helped. Well, see you for whoever comes next. Hey, this is the longest video I've made so far, so it'd be pretty cool if you could drop a comment on what you thought of the style, what you think of my points, and what you think of Quintessential Quintuplets as a whole. I plan to continue this series with Heather from Race to the Edge next, if you're interested in that, or other content on my channel. Could you please consider subbing? I work hard to make accurate review content, and I'd love to make this a full-time job. Also, if you have any other characters who you think hold back shows that they're in, feel free to drop it. I would be down to take a look at them. And if I disagree with you, then we can have a good discussion in the comments.